Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Career Coach Podcast. Today, we have another amazing guest on the show, and this show is all about uncovering tips and tools from young professionals in their late 20s and their early 30s that can help college students get insights, get experience, get knowledge that can give them guidance along their career journey. I really struggled to get this kind of information when I was in college. I went to Yale, I worked on Wall Street. And now my passion is to help students be successful. And so this show is all about extracting value, extracting insights, and sharing them with you. So grab a pen and paper and take notes, and feel free to get in touch with us afterwards. Enjoy the show. Lydia, welcome to the Career Podcast. I'm so excited to have you on board today. It's been what we just
Yeah.
discussed. It's been about 9 years since I last saw you.
Yeah, it has felt like nothing, but when we've counted, it feels like a lot.
Yeah, so for everyone listening, Lydia came on one of our programs I experienced in Cape Town. She did a summer program here, and we got to spend some time together. And I'm just so excited to dive into a story which covers so many different facets of her life, and I'm sure everyone here is going to benefit from it.
Cool.
Yeah, so a great place to start, as I always like to start, is just to, share a little bit about your background, where you studied, maybe your first job, and pretty much how you landed up where you are today.
Yeah, totally. I think I'm going to start with an overview, and then Aaron, you can ask me questions and I'll dive in. So basically, I graduated from Stanford with an engineering degree, and I played volleyball there. And so I had a scholarship during my college career. And then after that, I did the iExperience thing, which was amazing. And then I actually went into investment banking afterwards. And so I was an analyst there for 3 years. And I think what was great about that experience, which I also want to share as we continue in this episode to your listeners, is some of the kind of negative self-beliefs that I kind of learned from that experience, and hopefully from sharing them, like people can kind of relate or kind of learn, oh, okay, when I go into my first job after college, there are some things that are new and that I'll have to experience. And I don't necessarily have to take it so personally, just really to like normalize failure and normalize that making mistakes is such a normal part of your career that it happens to everybody. So I did investment banking for 3 years. And then afterwards, I went and worked at a startup. I worked at an ag tech startup called Farmers Business Network in their business operations, business development team. And like my friends and I always joke, it's more like a US thing. But when I tell them that I worked at Farmers Business Network, they were like, oh, did you work at like farmersonly.com? And that's actually like a dating website for farmers. And it just became like a running joke with my friends and I. But no, I did not work on the dating website. I worked on an ag tech startup. And then during the summer of 2019, I actually got an opportunity to star in a film. And I got to do acting for about like 7 weeks. And my job was super nice. They didn't like just fire me on the spot. They allowed me to come back to work. And I think like after spending that 7 weeks, almost similar to like the experience where you got to go to another country and kind of live and work there for a few weeks. I filmed the movie in China. It became the 2020 China's Oscar submission for the foreign film category. And that like 7 to 8 weeks of being on set, working with the crew, my fellow actors, and the director, like there was so much like hard work, accomplishment, a sense of purpose, like all of those things during that experience that when I came back to work in San Francisco, I realized how little of that I felt at my corporate job. And I think it was kind of that was the catalyst for me to do a little bit of soul searching, do a little bit of research, and to figure out why. And so I quit my job on the spot. I moved back home And then kind of 3 years doing like other things, like trying different paths to like figure out what I was going to do. And then now for about 2 years, I've had my own life coaching business where I help women in tech deal with overwhelm and stress so they can accomplish more at their job.
Wow, that is quite a journey, hey? They've been in the heart of the machine at investment banking. You've gone to kind of a startup environment, then you start in a movie. That sounds crazy, and now you're running your own business. That's an amazing set of different experiences. So I'm sure you've got some really interesting insights to share about why you chose this path. So I'm quite interested in exactly what you're doing now. What is your day to day like, and how does your business actually function?
Oh, cool. So, how my business functions now is I do one-to-one client meetings, and then mainly most of my sessions and meetings are Tuesday through Thursday, and then Monday and Wednesday is for like reaching out to being guests on podcasts, kind of the marketing thing to continue kind of the pipeline and kind of sales funnel of getting new clients for like the next quarter or whatever. And I think what I've learned the most from starting my own business and doing all of this stuff is I find that evaluation is really important. So whenever I do anything, like for example, after this podcast, I'm going to evaluate myself, like what went well, what didn't go well, what would I do better next time? And I think
Mm.
kind of standardizing a process of every time I do something, I'm going to learn those three things. And I think it kind of calms me down whenever I try something new because I know that at least will be certain every single time is that I will have an evaluation process for myself afterwards. And kind of having a more standard way of measuring success for myself instead of just constantly being like, was that good enough? Was it not? I have my evaluation worksheets and I can literally point to my brain that like, okay, this went well, this happened, and this happened. So I think that's been really important going through like this kind of entrepreneurship uncertainty kind of journey. And I think oh yeah, and then one more thing that really helps with me day to day, I realize now that this wasn't even the original question. But something else that helps me with my business day to day is whenever I am doing something and I feel either nervous or I'm kind of avoiding doing this work, or for example, even just for this podcast, yesterday I was feeling a little bit nervous, even though you're amazing, Aaron. It's just, the podcast, I was like, oh, it's going to be recorded. Um, I think what's really important is when you kind of feel that avoidance or feel that doubt, instead of
Mhm.
just ignoring it and kind of doing work, it's really important to kind of just tackle it. So, what I do is I have a process. Once again, number one, I list my doubts that I have, kind of what is going with that feeling. And the second thing I do is I kind of reconcile and edit those doubts. And then the third thing is basically go back to like, who am I serving? Why am I doing this? And when I do that, like I can even share what I wrote down. It was pretty silly, but when you write those things down and kind of put it to paper, you realize that, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong. There's like nothing I really need to be afraid of that's
Mhm.
going to happen tomorrow. And I think kind of these two things that I brought up, it's really just more treating like your brain as this amazing pattern finding machine. And if you don't really direct it, sometimes it can really just go anywhere.
Yeah, like sort of spiral out of control.
Yeah.
I think that those two things that you shared are very, very powerful processes, especially for students in college, because obviously we talk to a lot of students in college, and one of the main things that crops up is this feeling of overwhelm, feeling of like unworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
feeling of high levels of anxiety because maybe they're behind or they can't get the job that they want, or, the job that they think they want. And so I think, through this kind of podcast, providing college students with tools to manage stress, manage anxiety, and help take away limiting beliefs can be like very powerful for
Mm-hmm.
a college student. You're sitting at the gym on the treadmill, running and listening to this technique, going, "Oh wow, I'm about to go to an interview at a job tomorrow, and I'm quite nervous. Let me try write down the things that
Mm-hmm.
I'm nervous on. Let me label them and let me walk through them, and actually talk about them to myself. Can actually calm your nervous system down." So yeah,
Yeah.
a powerful technique. So yeah, walk us a little bit more through the process. So, how would you kind of help a college student manage their burnout or anxiety or mental health using these techniques?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll even just start because when you just talked about, I think you said unworthiness. But that's just basically one of the things I got. I will literally share my list of doubts that I had about this podcast recording session, and it's actually pretty funny because I think your listeners are the listeners listening, and when they write this down, it won't be very different. So, my list of doubts that I wrote down was that what I'm going to say will be boring and not good enough, and then not helpful for listeners, and that my background in history isn't that cool. Um, and anyways, so I just feel like I'm laughing at myself because I feel like that what I just shared in like my diary when I was 10 is probably the same thing. But it's just so funny reading it out loud to yourself. And I would never judge anyone else's, but obviously I'm just talking about my own. Um, but I think we all can repeat a lot of the same things to ourselves. And going back to your original question on how can I help or kind of guide the listeners who are feeling overwhelmed and stress, either in college or they're going through the interview process for work. I think that yeah, and preventing yourself to getting to the point of burnout. I think I want to talk about two things, which is the feeling of discomfort. And then the second one, which is resilience to kind of negative feedback. And I think I'm going to talk about the resilience to negative feedback right now, and we can go back to discomfort if we want to. Um, I think it's really important to address that rejection, getting the no, feeling like you failed. These are all very normal. And those things that happen aren't necessarily the problem. It's more what you do with it. So, for example, I think we all kind of minimize the kind of we kind of minimize how challenging those emotions might be when we fail or when we say no. And when we do that, our brain tries to make sense of it. So it creates a narrative. It tries to tie it into your identity or your story, whatever it is. So when you fail, for me personally, it might be, I'm just the type of person who isn't great at like the details, or I'm just someone that isn't great at public speaking, right? We kind of have these beliefs that we repeat about ourselves a lot. And I think it's really important to simplify. So just simplify. So whenever something negative happens, negative feedback, it's really important to realize that, okay, all failure is I had an expectation and then I have reality, which is a little bit lower. And so every single time you feel failure, there's just a gap between what you expected to happen and what really happened.
Mm,
And I think it's really important every time to just look at it from that mindset and kind of, it's not lower your expectations, but just call it for what it is. I didn't get that interview. I expected to get the interview. Reality, I didn't. And what are you making that gap mean about you? Are you making it mean that, no one's going to hire me, or I'll never get another job, or I won't be able to create the career I've always wanted? And it's really important to look at what you're making it mean, because that doesn't necessarily have to be true. It's not something that you can prove in a court of law, or like, okay, if this happens, it definitely means this. I think there's always an important thing to kind of create space and kind of think about, okay, when I make it mean this way, like, what is it actually creating for me? And I know I've kind of been rambling along, but I think the point is it's really important to notice what you tell yourself about yourself, because it affects how you present yourself, like, going forward. So if you believe that, this career isn't made out for you or something, or that you are a failure, it affects how you take actions going forward. And it also affects how you perceive incoming information. And I think one of the things that I really want to let listeners know is to always take the lead in how others should perceive you. So, for example, like if it's going into an interview, going into a networking event, like it's always important to show others how you perceive yourself, like in a very high self concept, because people more often than not will follow your lead. And I think how you do that is literally just write down on a piece of paper what you really think about yourself. If you think you can do this, if you think you can get the job, because if you are really honest and write all of the negative self-talk you tell yourself every day, and you're surprised that, other people don't perceive you highly or whatever it is, just look at all of the things you say to yourself, because it always starts with you. And I really think that, yeah, just start thinking highly of yourself and lead others in how they perceive you. And how to do that is to also, use that failure gap I was saying between expectation and reality to kind of get some idea on how you perceive yourself and begin to work on that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think we all have this identity and self-image of how we view ourselves. And sometimes that can be false, and not true. And it can be a story in our head. And I think, in order to make progress in your life and to be successful, you need to be able to change your mindset, or be able to shift your mind from negative to positive, which isn't actually that easy. And I think, when you're young, you might not have the skill set or the tools to be able to do that. So you can get stuck in this negative self-talk that often can put you in a place where you're not able to achieve things you want to achieve in your life. So I think what you're describing is a really powerful tool to say, in my life, I had many failures. I went to many interviews and I got negative feedback, just like you say. And I was like, oh, no, this is not good. But I think one of my key positive things about myself was I was able to not take those things too personally. And I was able to say, okay, well, I didn't succeed at that. I'm going to try again. And over time, I think the right thing will come along. And that did actually work out quite well for me. And it's one of the attributes, I think, that enabled me to be an entrepreneur, because, entrepreneurship, you just kind of fail all the time in the beginning. That's pretty much what happens. You try to do something, it doesn't work. You actually have to be able to be quite resilient to make it happen. And so I often teach students that, if you want to be successful, you need to be persistent, you need to be resilient, and you need to be cautiously optimistic in a way. And if you put all of those three things together, it helps you to become, quite a powerful person that can create opportunities for themselves.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I want to add one more thing, totally. And one thing that has really helped me with dealing with failure is whatever you think the problem is, whatever your problem is, you just instead ask yourself, like, what can I do to solve this? Um, I think that's just such an easy way to sidestep the negative, the spinning, the ruminating, and actually going into action. Um, so that's just what I just thought of.
100%. So, interestingly enough, imagine you went back to you could speak to yourself when you were in college, like your 18-year-old or 19-year-old self, and you could give yourself advice. What are the things that you would tell yourself, knowing what you know now after working in banking and, switching careers and doing all the things you've done? You must have so much advice that you would give to your college self. What would that be?
Yeah. So the advice I would give is, yeah, discomfort is normal. And also, I want to talk about, once again, failure. But I'm not going to go into that whole expectation failure hole. So I'm going to tell my college self that, you know, when you go into your first job or your interview or whatever it is so normal to feel discomfort. And that's all it is. It's just discomfort. It is so normal to feel uncomfortable when you are at a networking event and everyone's all dressed in their, business attire, whatever it is. It's so normal to feel discomfort. You don't need to make it mean that you don't belong, you're not enough, that what you said wasn't helpful or this person doesn't like you. Feeling discomfort in those situations is so normal and you don't need to make it mean anything else. Um, because, from my experience, I remember that I was, at my first job in investment banking, and every Monday morning we had these Monday morning meetings, and everybody in the office, all of the managing directors, VPs, associates, analysts, everyone was dressed in business, like casual, all of these dudes in ties and blazers. And I was one of the two girls that worked there. And I remember I felt so uncomfortable. And the advice I would give myself is that it's totally fine. Like, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable because your primitive brain, if you want to talk about our biology, it's always scanning for things that could be potential dangers to keep you safe. And if you are kind of the odd one out, or if you don't necessarily belong with everyone else, your brain will let you know. That's literally all that is. Because why I say that though is another reason is then I began to think, okay, in order for me to feel comfortable in these situations, I have to overperform. I have to be like the best performer. I have to be perfect. I have to be the star analyst in order to feel like I belong. And I want, to get validation from my peers. So this feeling kind of goes away. And that's how it initially starts. And I just want to say to be wary of that, because then when you do fail, the stakes feel so much higher because it's like, oh no, I made a mistake. This means that, I'll continue to feel uncomfortable. I'll continue to not really feel like I belong, whatever it is. And I think, once again, it's really easy for us to make the failure mean something else, but just take it as whatever you do in your interview process, your job process, the discomfort, the failure, it's all part of the ride. And just take a deep breath and maybe just fill out like an evaluation worksheet that I mentioned. What went well, what didn't go well, what would you do better next time, and really just ground yourself and just simplify.
Yeah, ground and simplify and evaluate yourself. All really, really good tactics to help you navigate that complex environment of like figuring out, what the perfect career is. So, you were working in investment banking after college. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that experience because I'm sure a lot of students are really interested in going into investment banking as a career. And I worked in finance for 3 years after college at a hedge fund, and I was really not prepared for that. It was quite a shock to my system. Had to be at the office every day at 5 a.m. and I would leave at 9 p.m. And I just didn't really understand that the adjustment from college into the real world was a huge adjustment for me. One of the things that I really appreciate from my time on Wall Street was, I really learned how to work hard. And I think that is quite a good skill. You learn how to put hours in, you learn discipline, and, you learn systems and processes, which I think are really good skills for the rest of your life. What was your experience working in banking, and what did you like and what did you dislike about it?
Yeah. I think my experience in banking, I really enjoyed my internship because I just felt like I was working with a lot of my friends and I was getting paid and I could go out on the weekends and, eat out more because the salary was great. And I enjoyed my summer internship so much. And then when I joined full time, I think what made it less enjoyable was I just added a shit ton of pressure on myself. And I think, of course, the environment kind of builds that just because, as you said, you're there for really long hours and you're not really wanting to be there for that long, but you kind of just have more projects that are within your responsibility. And I think, yeah, I just put so much pressure on myself that I slowly just enjoyed myself less and less. And one thing I will say is that part of the culture of finance, wherever you end up, there's like a shared component of complaining. Like, you know, everyone kind of connects with each other by how much they complain about work and how horrible the work conditions are. And it's pretty fun, honestly. It's like a stress reliever. But I will caution and just say, sometimes when we do that too much, that kind of becomes the only thing we think about. And I'm not saying that, if you just change your mindset, finance, investment banking, Wall Street is just going to be a breeze. Um, but I will say that the environment kind of just adds to really just focusing on how demanding the job is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it is a demanding job, and we get a lot of students applying to our investment banking program who, have no finance experience. And our investment banking programs are designed to teach students, how to do valuation, how to do
Yeah.
modeling, and then how to apply that in the working world and kind of set them up for a career in finance. And, we focus on saying to students, there's lots of different avenues in finance. There's banking, there's private equity, there's venture capital, there's all kinds of different roads. But, if you want to go into this career, you have to also know that this is the type of environment you're stepping into, and this is the kind of work ethic you actually need to have. Yeah, we try to prepare them for that career path. And we've seen a lot of people be very successful, but we've also
Yeah.
seen quite a lot of people say, okay, well, that was great, but this is not really for me. And then actually either move into tech or move into starting a business, which is,
Yeah.
after that foundation, then they kind of like figure out what is the right thing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm quite curious. Like, I was looking at your website, and it's a beautiful website, by the way. I really like it.
Thank you.
And I noticed that you really specialize in helping women in tech get the raise and recognition they deserve. And you've got kind of a 12-week program that you focus on. What is the reason that you focus on women in particular? And what does this 12-week program entail?
Yeah. So, such a great question. I focus on women in particular because it's the experience, it's something I've had experience doing, or yeah, experience doing. And I realized that all it is just giving women this. kind of space and environment to know that like I'm here to support you when whatever you're going through in tech. It could just be feeling like discomfort or whatever it is. And I think women in particular, they have a very high EQ. They like really want to accomplish a lot, but there are things in the environment that kind of prevent them from really going all in. And it could be very simply put, the patriarchy, but in like a, not in like a, raise your torches against the patriarchy. No, it's just what it is. And I think it's just important to know that this is the environment you're in. I'm not saying, that we need to change men's behavior in order for women to feel more safe at work. I think we found that that doesn't really work. And I realize part of the movement that I want to create is for women to take the power back and really just say, okay, I really don't need you to change. I just have to focus on this, this, and this, and focus on what I can control, what I can create in my life every day. Like just deal with the overwhelming stress that come from working in a male dominated workplace. Find a place, which is working with me, to figure out how to deal with it and being like, oh, so the reason why I react or feel this way when I go into the meeting actually isn't like a character flaw. It's actually tied into my biology, or it's tied into, human psychology on why I would feel this way. And just letting and spreading kind of more information so women are more equipped to deal with, okay, I understand when I feel that way, it's because of this. Now I can move on and actually get shit done. So I think that's kind of why and what I do.
So can you talk through, some example of how you've helped one of your clients go from sort of a negative situation to a positive situation and what actually changed in that process?
Yeah. I think one of the clients that I've worked with, they actually wanted to work with me because they wanted to get their dream job. And as of last week, they actually got it, which was so awesome. And I think when I started working with them, kind of a negative situation to a positive one, I think she didn't really believe that she was, you know, she believed that she was underutilized at her current job and really took, she had her own experience in the job search process and basically just took the job that came to her. And then she made it mean that, you know, she wasn't good enough. They hired someone else at a higher level and didn't think that she was good enough and all of those things. And basically, what I did with her is before she went into the interview process to find her next job, which was to get that senior level role uh, that she wanted, um, it was just working with, really teasing out, is it really true that because you got this position, it means that you're not as valued or you're not as important as you think you are, or whatever kind of diction that we used. But basically, it just came into helping her see how valuable she was. And then that kind of helped her go into the interview process in a much different way. And then that led her to get the job that she wanted.
That's great. That's such a great success story. I
Yeah.
hope you can use some of those insights for college students going through similar experiences. I think it can really be applied in a similar environment.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to your life at college. When you think about the decisions that you made and how you lived your life, what were some of the best decisions you made while you were in college that really supported you in the life that you have today?
Yeah. The best decision I made was joining a business fraternity at school. And I think, um, yeah, and the people I've met through there are still some of my closest friends. And I think what was so great about joining that business fraternity was that you had, basically when you rushed, or I even forget what it's called.
It is called rushing.
Yeah, it's rushing, and then after you join, you're a pledge. Oh yeah, the pledge process. Oh my god. Was basically, it's so nerdy, but they basically like helped you teach the basics of writing a resume, taught you how to, create a LinkedIn profile, just basically all of those things, and how to conduct yourself in interviews. And that was just such a great community to be a part of. And um, also just, connecting myself with other young adults or college students who also were interested in, banking, consulting, and all of those things. I think that was the best decision I made in college, was just joining a community like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually spoke to someone recently who said that, the best way to, progress your career would be to join clubs and make friends with people who have similar interests and build positive relationships and network. I think networking is something I talk quite a lot about on this podcast because I struggled with it when I was in college. And we've actually made a cool little networking program that if the listeners share this podcast with, or the newsletter with 5 friends, they get access to this How to Network program. But I found networking is something I just didn't know how to do in college. How would you, if say to your college students, this is a good way to network? Like, how do you do that in your life?
Yeah, I think, well, in college, what's so great is that you are already in such a huge network of other
Mhm.
students. So definitely joining clubs. And I really liked going to I think, yeah, they're like career fairs basically. And you just get a ton of business cards, of people that work kind of close to your college. And maybe it's too early, maybe it's not. I would just suggest grabbing a coffee with, someone that you met at a career event. And I think people, well, hopefully, but people really like to give back and to mentor and to, help other people looking to create a career. And I think also they would just love a break from work. And I think it's just great to maybe go on a walk with someone or like get a coffee. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think those little simple things actually go quite a long way in helping you build up that network, especially if you do it like multiple times and you actually create like a real relationship with someone.
Yeah. Well, and even like, well, I understand like how I know you is slightly different, but I guess I don't know how many times I met you or interacted with you during the program, but it's like 10 years later, 9 years later, I was like, "Oh yeah, Aaron, he's just such a nice guy and I can't wait to talk to him again." It's just little things that can stick with you. All you have to do is just meet the person and kind of get a sense of who they are, and that really just leaves a little imprint in your brain somewhere.
So I would love to talk about your experience in South Africa. I think it was your first time coming to Cape Town. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, why did you decide to do this program all the way in Cape Town, foreign country, middle of nowhere, and like what was your experience like being down here for 8 weeks?
Yeah. So I think at Stanford, they have Stanford and Cape Town. And so that's how I kind of even learned about Cape Town, South Africa. And because I did sports, and then because senior year, I just wanted to, party and and celebrate my senior year. So I didn't really like travel and do a study abroad when my sport was over. So I just really also wanted the opportunity to have a similar experience of study abroad. And that's personally why I wanted to do it. And I thought it was literally the same thing, if not better, because it wasn't just, Stanford kids. It was kids from everywhere, like UVA, You can probably name a lot more. Aaron, sorry. Well, yeah, the UVA just stands out for me
Yeah.
because eventually I actually lived with a girl that I met in Cape Town in San Francisco, Jessica Zimmerman. I actually lived with her.
Yes, I know Jessica. Yeah.
Yeah, and I literally just crossed paths with her twice. Like I remember like I saw her get yogurt once in Cape Town or something and then who knew like 2 years later she reached out to me and was like, hey, like I need somewhere to live. I was like, oh, I have a room open. Um and yeah, it was just such an amazing experience. And I don't know if it's the same now, but the rand is amazing when you exchange the US dollar.
It is actually really cheap in South Africa. I'm not gonna lie. You can get an incredible coffee for like $2, an amazing meal
Amazing.
for $5. The food is good. Everything is really cheap here. That's one of the reasons I love living here. But the students do
Amazing.
love it when they come because of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like Bali, the prices and stuff, and also just the quality and
Quality is high.
like all of this, like Cape Town is where it's at. And yeah, I loved my experience.
Yeah, I think it's important for young people to travel, which was essentially one of the reasons I started the company in the first place. I thought, you know, if it's just in my life, I came from South Africa, I went to Yale, and just going to another country for me was such a big learning experience. But then when I was at college, I traveled to India, I traveled to Peru, I traveled to Brazil, I traveled to all these places, and every time I went to a new place, I was like, wow, this is so different, like a different culture, different political system, different
Yeah.
economics, and people with different beliefs. And every time I traveled, I learned so much about the world and how it worked. And it was just fascinating to me. And I think, you know, I always say if you're going to start a business, you should probably start something that really resonates with you. So I guess with you, the helping women deal with stress and anxiety and helping them build better lives for themselves really resonates with you. And for me, it was helping college students get confidence and skills, but also to travel and see the world just like I had. I just thought, that just needs to be done more for college students. And since we started, we've had around 4,000 students do these programs. And it's always so great to see, the impact that these experiences have on
Experiences.
it's
Yeah.
different for everybody. Everybody gets something different out of travel. It's not the same, but we just create a platform that allows people to experience a new version of themselves.
Yeah, totally. And I think something that people will probably understand, or listeners will understand, is whenever you travel, you kind of wish you got a better sense of what it's like to live there. And I think with iExperience or with the platform you created, like I actually got to kind of live and get to meet like people, locals, and actually get to really experience what living somewhere else would feel like. And so I think that's why it was so memorable.
Yeah, 100%. So, how do you manage your work life balance currently in your life today?
Okay, so how I manage my work life balance is basically this. I have results that I want to complete by this week and like monthly. And I think that I call it Monday hour one. So on Monday, the first hour of Monday, I plan what I want to
Mm.
complete this week. And it's results based. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to spend 3 hours doing this. No, it's like, I'm going to send out 10 emails. I'm going to like things that I can check off and say I completed. And then I also just write how long it's going to take me to do it. And that's how long it's going to take me to do it. And then basically, when I complete that, I'm good to go. I can just go chill. And so I think kind of that has really helped me kind of get that work life balance in
I actually
check.
I have a similar system. I use a system called time boxing for productivity. So basically,
Yeah.
I look at my week and I always have my goals for the year. up somewhere, because I'm like, this is kind of like what I want to achieve this year. And whether it's in the area of my career or new experiences or, friends and family, I've got some like key objectives under these sort of things that I value. So I kind of know, and I try to be quite bold when I'm thinking about my life. I'm like, okay, let me rather think bigger
Mm.
rather than not. And then when I sit in my week and I plan my week, I go, what can I do this week that's going to move one of my goals significantly forward? And I think the thing is, I don't try to do everything in one week. I try to focus on specific projects at a time. So,
Yeah.
and then I block out time, like 4 hours or 2 hours, to focus on one project and make a lot of progress in that
Yeah.
time. And then I put away my phone and I do some deep work and focus. And I find that works really well, because in the past, I used to try to do a lot of things at once. I had like 100
Yeah.
tabs open. I was kind of like switching between tabs, trying to like do this and do that. And it
Yeah.
worked to a degree, but it kind of confusing at times. And I noticed that I was doing stuff, but I wasn't as effective. So now I
Yeah.
even plan like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym at this time, or I'm going to play a sport at this time. And when I look at my week on a Monday, it's like really well planned out. And I've been teaching that technique to our staff members and various other people, and it's actually impacted their lives quite positively. I've noticed that a lot of people don't actually do that. So for people listening, I think it's definitely something to check out. It's called time boxing, and it's quite a nice way to plan ahead, and it seems very similar to what you do.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, because you can also book in the things that like make you feel good. And I've actually learned that sometimes you have to be like, okay, well, going for, lunch with my friend makes me feel good. Then I'm going to make sure that I do that twice a week. you know,
Yeah.
it's quite a cool system.
No, totally. And actually, I do that first. So, like, what I do first is like, I highlight in a color I like, dinner with my significant other, playing fetch with my dog, going hiking on the weekend. So I see that I've already planned these things that make me feel good and kind of fill my cup, so to speak. And then I put in like, okay, then I do my work stuff and I fill it in those gaps. So totally.
Yeah,
It's really important to also book that on your calendar.
100%. So in terms of resumes and interview advice, what would you give as advice to a college student who wants to like, improve their resume or improve their interviewing skills?
Yes. Okay. So I'll do the interviewing skills one. I think something that's really important when you sit down and do interview prep, I actually really like doing this, is put yourself in the right mindset and energy first. So basically, when you're sitting down and preparing for your interviews, answer this question like, what is like the goal that I want to achieve, right? And if it's like to get this job at this company, then it's the next question is, so what will it feel like when you do get the job? And what will you think about yourself when you do get the job? And so what if it's like, your thought is, I finally did it, like I made it, and the feeling is just accomplished or just
Mm.
feeling really just a lot of joy. And then it's really just, okay, like from that place, prepare for your interview. Like from that place, answer these questions. And I think that that little shift can be a quick little hack to not working from doubt or anxiety. Because when you work from those feelings, the kind of quality of what you create is a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Um, I agree with that. And I think, when it comes to a resume, for me, I think having lots of experiences, but showing in those experiences how the work you did really impacted the company that you were working at, using metrics, saying, okay, I worked on this project and I focused on these particular skills. And through the work that I did, the impact that I had on the company was X. Whether it was more clients or more revenue, it's always good to show metrics on your resume. I think when recruiters are looking at that, it actually makes your resume stand out on the pile quite a bit.
That's great. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually want to ask a little bit of like a tough question. What are one of the toughest decisions that you had to make in the last couple of years, and how did you navigate that?
Hmm. The- I don't um I don't really know if I have any of those. I just feel like when the time comes for me to make a decision, it just becomes really obvious what decision I have to make is. So I think like some people would view that me quitting my job and moving back home, which is in Southern California, like moving out of San Francisco and just leaving the life I created there, might have been a tough decision. But I think that when you are kind of facing uncertainty, I'm talking about in that specific moment for me, like uncertain about what I'm going to do next. I think the only way you can create certainty for yourself is to fully support the decision that you've made. And I think that is how you create certainty when you are kind of at a crossroads or when you don't know what to expect. And I guess that's what I would say about like tough decisions. And I think actually recently a decision I had to make, it actually wasn't completely obvious. Like it wasn't like, oh, I'm in so much pain, I need to like fix this. It was more a slow death. Like I realized that I was very just kind of floating along and not taking action and doing things that scared me. I was kind of just like, oh, yeah, I'll just, send some emails, post some things on LinkedIn about my business. But I wasn't really taking huge steps like reaching out to be on podcasts and things like that, that I thought were scarier. And I think something I'll say about that is just sometimes, like, in my situation, I can elaborate a little bit more. I'm just, when I was starting my business, I was like, okay, I'm just going to try this for a year and see if this works. And I had to confront myself and be like, okay, I can either fail by, putting a lot of pressure on myself, being too afraid to, take action and do things that scare me, but the end result is still the same. I fail. Or if the end result is I failed still, I would rather have failed just going like balls to the walls, just like having as much fun as I can, trying to be as creative as I can, trying to solve every single problem and doing the weirdest like things to solve it. For example, like when I started my business, I was like, I'm just going to grab my dog and have a sign that says 10 minutes free life coaching and just set up myself in a coffee shop and just like see what happens and really try and engage. So I'm just talking about like doing things like that, where it's like, if your end result is that you're going to fail, obviously I don't hope that for anyone, but just decide how you want to fail. Like, is it, you're just gonna, coast, or yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
bold. That's powerful. But to be honest, that might be the last bit of advice we give in this episode, because we're already on 53 minutes. Can you believe it?
Oh, that's awesome.
I can never believe how quickly time goes when we're talking about such interesting topics. But um, is it okay if listeners in this audience reach out to you if they want to chat or book a call with you? How can they do that?
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love to give back and help others. So, if the listeners have any questions about anything I talked about, just reach out on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, I'm sure there'll be a link here. Yeah. My name is Lydia Bai. And then you can also just schedule a mini session with me on my website. And I'll also give the link to Erin. So it's really easy for you to find me. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I am more than happy to share my network with you.
I think that would be great. And I think there's so many college students, like as this podcast grows and we'll repost the episode. And I think you can have a lot of impact, with people who are looking to make big, bold moves and looking to change their mindset and looking to develop skills and tools so that they can navigate the complexity of their career challenges.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I'm so excited for listeners that are going through that. I know it doesn't feel amazing, but what you overcome really just creates so much for you in terms of character, experience, and kind of teaches you like who you are. So I know it doesn't feel great, but it's just such a good thing to go through.
Amazing. Well, Lydia, thank you so much for coming on the show. There's been so many amazing nuggets of wisdom that I've learned, and it's been so nice to catch up as well. So, yeah, thank you. And I look
Thank
forward to
you.
talking to you again soon.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap. What an amazing episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please don't forget to go onto the Spotify link, like and subscribe to the podcast, maybe leave a review. And if you want to see the video, you can go to the YouTube channel and watch it over there. But the best part of all is the newsletter. So every week we send out a newsletter, the Career Coach newsletter. This will give you access to additional information, show notes, tutorials, book reviews. So I highly recommend that you sign up and subscribe to the newsletter. And as always, feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. And see you soon on the next episode.